The massive dragon lay dying in the dark caves of planet Nexus 7. His name was Korath, and he was older than most stars in the galaxy. For 4,000 years, he had been completely alone. He was the very last of his kind, the final star dragon left alive in the entire universe. Once, dragons like him had soared between planets, their scales shining brighter than suns. They were the guardians of ancient knowledge, keepers of cosmic secrets that could reshape reality itself. But time had been cruel to his species. One by one, his brothers and sisters had faded away, their light dimming until nothing remained but memories. Now Korath's own magnificent scales, which once blazed like captured starlight, had dulled to the color of old ash. His breathing came in shallow, painful gasps that echoed through the cavern. Every heartbeat felt like it might be his last. The great dragon who had once commanded the power to move asteroids could barely lift his massive head. Far above the caves, human ships had crashed during a terrible solar storm. The rescue teams were working frantically to find all the survivors scattered across the rocky landscape. Captain Jerome Washington led the main search party while Dr. Alicia Brown treated the injured back at their makeshift medical station. Everyone was accounted for except one small girl. 8-year-old Keisha had wandered away from the crash site while the adults were busy with rescue operations. She was curious by nature, always exploring places she probably shouldn't. Her grandmother back on Earth used to say that curiosity would either make her famous or get her into serious trouble someday. The little girl followed a strange, warm breeze that seemed to call to her. It led her down a winding path between tall black rocks and into the mouth of an enormous cave. Most children would have been terrified by the darkness, but Keisha had always been brave. Her flashlight beam danced across the walls as she ventured deeper underground. When she finally reached the main chamber, what she saw should have made her scream and run. A creature the size of a building lay sprawled across the cavern floor. His head alone was bigger than her family's entire apartment. Massive wings were folded against his sides, and his tail disappeared into the shadows at the far end of the cave. But Keisha didn't run. Instead, something about the great beast made her feel incredibly sad. She could see that he was hurt, maybe dying. His breathing was labored, and his eyes were closed as if he was sleeping a sleep he might never wake up from. The brave little girl walked right up to the dragon's enormous head and sat down cross-legged beside him. She placed her tiny hand on one of his large scales, surprised to find it was warm to the touch. "Are you okay, Mr. Dragon?" she whispered. At the sound of her voice, Korath's ancient eyes slowly opened. In all his thousands of years of existence, no creature had ever approached him without fear. Most beings either worshipped him from a distance or tried to destroy him out of terror. But this small human child showed neither reverence nor fear, only genuine concern. He studied her with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of entire civilizations. She was so small, so fragile, yet she radiated a warmth that he hadn't felt in centuries. Her dark skin seemed to glow in the dim light of the cave, and her eyes sparkled with intelligence and kindness. "My grandpa used to tell me stories about dragons," Keisha said softly, settling more comfortably beside his massive head. "He said most people got dragons all wrong. They weren't scary monsters at all. They were wise and noble, and they protected people instead of hurting them." As she spoke, something incredible happened. Deep within Korath's fading consciousness, a tiny spark of light flickered to life. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to him with such innocent trust. Her words carried a power that he had almost forgotten existed, the ancient magic of storytelling itself. The little girl continued talking, her voice echoing gently in the vast chamber. She told him about her grandfather, about her home on Earth, about the book she loved to read. With each word she spoke, that tiny spark of light inside the dying dragon grew just a little bit brighter. For the first time in 1,000 years, Korath felt something other than the crushing weight of loneliness. This remarkable human child had given him something precious, hope. And though he didn't yet understand how or why, her simple act of sitting beside him and sharing her stories had begun to change everything. Every day for the next week, Keisha found ways to slip away from the rescue camp and return to Korath's cave. The search teams, led by Commander Blake Thompson and medic Dr. Zara Williams, were too busy organizing the evacuation to notice one small girl's regular disappearances. They assumed she was playing somewhere safe within the camp boundaries. But Keisha had discovered something far more important than safety. She had found a friend who needed her stories more than anything else in the universe. Each afternoon, she would settle beside the great dragon's head and open the floodgates of her imagination. Her grandfather had filled her childhood with tales from old Earth, stories passed down through generations of her family. Now she shared every single one with her new friend. "Back on Earth," she began one day, her small voice carrying clearly through the cavern, My grandpa told me about dragons who lived in mountains made of clouds. They didn't hoard gold or jewels like in the scary stories. Instead, they collected something much more valuable. They collected memories and dreams and the most beautiful stories anyone had ever told. As Keisha spoke, Koritha's massive form seemed to relax. His breathing became less labored, and occasionally, one of his dulled scales would flicker with the faintest hint of its former brilliance. The child didn't notice these small changes, but the ancient dragon felt each story flowing through him like warm sunshine after an endless winter. There was this one dragon, Keisha continued, swinging her legs as she sat beside him, who made friends with a little girl just like me. But she lived in a village where everyone was afraid of dragons. The dragon would visit her secretly at night, and she would tell him about her day, about the bread her mother baked, about the songs the birds sang, about the way flowers smelled after rain. The power in her words was unlike anything Korith had experienced in his long existence. Each tale she told seemed to weave invisible threads of energy around his fading spirit. He began to understand that this human child possessed something extraordinary, a gift that his own species had recognized eons ago but had nearly forgotten existed. The dragon in Grandpa's story was very old and very lonely, Keisha said, unknowingly describing Koritha's own situation perfectly. He had lived for so many years that he had forgotten what joy felt like. But when the little girl shared her stories with him, he remembered that the world was full of wonder. Her stories made him young again, at least in his heart. Day after day, the ritual continued. Keisha would arrive with new tales, each one more captivating than the last. She told him about dragons who painted rainbows across the sky after storms, about wise dragons who taught humans how to grow food and build homes, about gentle dragons who sang lullabies to help children sleep safely through the night. What neither of them realized was that something profound was happening during these storytelling sessions. Ancient texts from Koritha's civilization had spoken of a legendary power, the ability of certain gifted beings to share their life essence through narrative. It was a form of magic so rare that most scholars believed it was just mythology. But as Keisha poured her heart into each story, she was unconsciously channeling her own vital energy into the dying dragon. Her tales weren't just entertaining him, they were literally keeping him alive. The warmth and passion in her voice, the genuine love she felt for the stories themselves, all of it was flowing into Koritha's weakening spirit like a river of liquid starlight. Dragons were the original storytellers, she explained during one of her visits, repeating something her grandfather had told her years ago. Before humans learned to write, before we had books or movies, dragons carried all the important stories in their hearts. When they told those stories to people, they shared a piece of their own souls. Lieutenant Damon Carter had begun to notice that the Williams girl disappeared for hours each day, but something about her behavior suggested she had found something important. She always returned to camp with a peaceful expression and a slight glow in her cheeks, as if she had been somewhere magical. Unknown to everyone at the rescue site, Keisha's daily storytelling sessions were performing a miracle. With each passing day, Koritha's scales regained a little more of their luster. His breathing became stronger, his movements less labored. The power of human storytelling, that uniquely human ability to find meaning and beauty in even the simplest experiences, was literally bringing the last star dragon back from the edge of death. But this miracle came with a price that neither the child nor the dragon yet understood. 2 weeks had passed since the crash, and Chief Medical Officer Dr. Nia Jackson was growing increasingly worried about one of their youngest survivors. Keisha Williams had been perfectly healthy right after the accident, but now something was seriously wrong. The 8-year-old girl was losing weight rapidly. Dark circles had formed under her bright eyes, and her once boundless energy was fading day by day. She moved more slowly, spoke more quietly, and often seemed distant, as if part of her mind was somewhere else entirely. "I've run every test I can think of," Dr. Jackson explained to Commander Blake Thompson during their morning briefing. "Her blood work shows signs of severe fatigue, like someone who hasn't slept properly in months. But she claims she's sleeping fine. Her neural activity is strange too, there are patterns I've never seen before." Commander Thompson frowned as he reviewed the medical reports. Could it be some kind of delayed reaction to the crash? Maybe exposure to the solar radiation during the storm. "That's what I thought initially, but none of the other survivors are showing similar symptoms. It's like something is slowly draining her life energy away." Dr. Jackson paused, looking troubled. "Blake, if we don't figure out what's wrong soon, we could lose her." Meanwhile, Keisha continued her daily visits to the cave, completely unaware that each storytelling session was costing her more than she could afford to give. She had noticed feeling tired lately, but she attributed it to all the excitement of being on an alien planet. The important thing was that her stories were helping her dragon friend. And Korath was indeed improving dramatically. His scales now gleamed with hints of their former radiance, and he could lift his massive head without the tremendous effort it had required just days earlier. For the first time in centuries, he felt truly alive. But this newfound vitality came with a terrible realization. During one of Keisha's visits, as she sat telling him about dragons who helped lost travelers find their way home, Korath noticed how pale she looked. Her small hand, which she always placed affectionately on his scales while talking, felt cooler than before. Her voice, while still filled with passion for her stories, had grown noticeably weaker. The ancient dragon's heart filled with horror as he understood what was happening. The child's remarkable gift for storytelling wasn't just entertaining him or lifting his spirits, it was literally transferring her life force into his dying body. Every tale she told, every moment of joy and wonder she shared, was flowing from her young spirit into his ancient one. "Little storyteller," he whispered when she paused between tales, his voice a low rumble that made the cave walls vibrate gently. "You must stop coming here." Keisha looked up at him with surprise. It was the first time he had spoken directly to her, and his voice was beautiful, like distant thunder mixed with wind chimes. "Why? Don't you like my stories anymore?" "I love your stories more than all the treasures in the galaxy," Korath replied, and he meant every word. "But they are costing you something precious, something you cannot afford to give." The little girl shook her head stubbornly. "Grandpa always said that stories are meant to be shared. He said keeping stories to yourself is like hiding candles in a dark room. They're only good if you light them and share the glow with others. Your grandfather was very wise, but he did not know what I know now." The dragon's ancient eyes filled with something that might have been tears if dragons could cry. "Each story you tell me makes me stronger, but it makes you weaker. I am stealing your life to save my own." Keisha stood up and placed both her small hands on his massive snout, looking directly into his eyes with the fearless determination that only children possess. "Then we're trading fair and square. You were dying and alone, and now you're getting better and you have a friend. I think that's worth it." "No, child. Your life is worth infinitely more than mine. I have lived for 4,000 years. You have barely begun your journey." But Keisha had inherited more than just storytelling ability from her grandfather, she had also inherited his stubborn streak. "A trade is a trade. Besides, I'm not going anywhere. You need these stories, and I need to tell them. That's just how it works." As she settled back down to continue her tales, Korath faced an impossible choice. He could send her away forcefully, using his returning strength to frighten her from ever returning. This would save her life but doom him to die alone in the darkness. Or he could accept her sacrifice, growing stronger with each visit while watching this remarkable child fade away. Neither option was acceptable to the ancient dragon's noble heart. 3 days later, Keisha collapsed while walking to the cave. Her mother, Dr. Nia Williams, found her daughter unconscious on the rocky path, her skin pale as moonlight and her breathing so shallow it was barely visible. The medical team rushed her back to the emergency shelter, where every monitor showed the same terrifying truth: the little girl was dying. "Her life signs are failing across the board," Dr. Jackson reported grimly to the assembled rescue team. "It's like her body is just shutting down. I've never seen anything like it." Commander Thompson paced anxiously outside the medical tent. "How long does she have?" "At this rate? Maybe hours. Possibly less." Dr. Jackson's voice was heavy with defeat. "I'm sorry, Blake. Without knowing what's causing this, there's nothing more I can do." Deep in his cave, Korath felt the exact moment when Keisha's storytelling energy stopped flowing to him. The sudden absence hit him like a physical blow, and he knew instantly that his brave little friend was in mortal danger. The connection they had formed over weeks of shared stories had become so strong that he could sense her fading life force like a candle flickering in a hurricane. The ancient dragon had lived for millennia, had witnessed the birth and death of entire civilizations, but he had never felt pain like this. This small human child had given him hope when he had none, friendship when he was utterly alone, and life itself when death seemed certain. Now she was paying the ultimate price for his salvation. "No," he whispered into the empty cavern, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "This will not happen. I will not let her die for my sake." Using strength he didn't know he still possessed, Korath lifted his massive form from the cave floor. His movements were still painful, but the weeks of absorbing Keisha's life energy had restored enough of his power to make what he was planning possible. It would require every ounce of ancient magic he had accumulated over 4,000 years of existence, but he didn't hesitate for even a moment. The dragon began to gather his life force, not just the energy Keisha had given him, but everything he had ever been. Memories spanning millennia, wisdom gathered from 1,000 worlds, the cosmic power that flowed through the veins of all star dragons. He compressed it all into a blazing sphere of pure energy that hovered above his heart. But as he prepared to pour everything back into Keisha's failing body, something unexpected happened. The energy sphere began to pulse and change, taking on properties that defied every law of physics Korath understood. Instead of simply returning her life force, the magic was creating something entirely new. The sphere split into two interconnected parts, one containing his ancient wisdom and cosmic power, the other holding her boundless creativity and emotional depth. Rather than choosing one or the other, the magic was seeking to merge them both into something greater than either could be alone. A true bonding, Korath whispered in amazement. It's been 10,000 years since the last one. Without another moment's hesitation, he launched himself into the air and flew toward the human camp. His massive wings, which hadn't carried him aloft in centuries, caught the wind with surprising strength. The rescue team scattered in panic as the enormous dragon landed near their medical shelter, but he paid them no attention. Korath's great head pushed gently through the entrance of the emergency tent, causing Dr. Jackson to stumble backward in shock. But the dragon's eyes were fixed only on the small figure lying so still on the medical table. "What I am about to do has never been attempted between our species," he said, his voice somehow calm despite the urgency of the situation. "But she is dying because of me, and I will not allow that to happen." Before anyone could stop him, Korath placed his massive snout gently against Keisha's forehead. The energy sphere that contained both their essences flowed from his heart into hers, and the medical tent erupted in brilliant golden light. Instead of the violent transfer everyone expected, the process was surprisingly gentle. Keisha's body began to glow with warm radiance as her failing system suddenly surged back to life. But more than that, her mind expanded to encompass knowledge and memories that spanned the cosmos. At the same time, Korath felt emotions and sensations he had never experienced in 4 millennia of existence. Through Keisha's human perspective, he rediscovered wonder, joy, and the simple pleasure of being alive. Her creativity flowed through his ancient consciousness like fresh water through a desert. When the light finally faded, two beings looked at each other with shared understanding. They were still themselves, but they were also something more, the first successful human-dragon symbiosis in galactic history. 6 months after the miraculous bonding, Keisha Williams and Korath had become the most talked-about partnership in the galaxy. News of their incredible connection had spread across every human colony and alien world, sparking wonder, fear, and heated debates in equal measure. The young girl still looked like any other 9-year-old, with bright eyes and an infectious smile. But now those eyes held depths of cosmic knowledge that made seasoned space captains feel uncomfortable. She could sense disturbances in space-time from light years away and communicate with alien species that had never encountered humans before. Most remarkably, she retained all her human warmth and curiosity, making her the perfect bridge between worlds. Korath, meanwhile, had undergone his own transformation. His scales now blazed with colors that shifted like aurora lights, and his ancient wisdom was tempered with a childlike joy he had never known. Through Keisha's perspective, he saw the universe as a place of endless possibility rather than slow decay. Their first major test came when the mining colony on Kepler Station sent out a desperate distress call. Strange creatures had emerged from a dimensional rift, beings made of pure shadow that devoured energy and left dead zones in space where nothing could survive. The Colonial Defense Force was powerless against them. Admiral Zara Hayes initially hesitated to send a child into such danger, but conventional weapons had proven completely useless against the shadow creatures. With reluctant approval from the Galactic Council, she dispatched Keisha and Korath to investigate. When they arrived at Kepler Station, the situation was even worse than reported. The shadow beings weren't just consuming energy, they were feeding on hope itself, leaving the surviving colonists in a state of complete despair. Traditional military tactics were worse than useless, they seemed to make the creatures stronger. "They're not really alive," Keisha explained to Colonel Devon Carter as they observed the creatures from a safe distance. "They're more like holes in reality. Empty spaces where stories used to be." This gave her an idea that would have been impossible before her bonding with Korath. Drawing on her grandfather's teachings about the power of narrative and the dragon's cosmic awareness, she began to weave stories directly into the fabric of space around the shadow creatures. But these weren't ordinary stories. Using her enhanced abilities, Keisha projected tales of courage, love, and hope into the dimensional tears themselves. She told stories about colonists who overcame impossible odds, about families reunited after long separations, about the simple joy of watching stars being born in distant nebulae. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Wherever her stories touched the shadow creatures, they began to take on solid form and color. The empty voids that had been consuming everything around them started to fill with light and substance. Within hours, the deadly entities had transformed into beautiful, crystalline beings that sparkled like living gems. Incredible, breathed Dr. Malik Washington, the colony's chief scientist. She didn't destroy them, she gave them something they were missing. She gave them identity, purpose, existence itself. Word of this miracle spread quickly through the outer colonies. Soon, Keisha and Korath were being called upon to handle crises that no military force could address. When the ancient void wraiths emerged from dark space to consume entire star systems, only the child's story-weaving abilities combined with the dragon's cosmic fire could drive them back into the emptiness. Their methods were unlike anything in military doctrine. Instead of fighting enemies, they transformed them. Instead of destroying threats, they gave them new purpose. Keisha would identify what was missing from each hostile force, what story they needed to hear to become something better, while Korath provided the cosmic power to make those stories reality. The partnership wasn't without its challenges. Some human colonies feared that Keisha was no longer truly human, while certain alien species viewed Korath as an abomination for bonding with a lesser life form. But their success rate spoke for itself, and gradually, even their harshest critics began to respect what they had accomplished. Perhaps more importantly, their example inspired others. Dr. Amora Brooks discovered that many human children possessed latent storytelling abilities similar to Keisha's. When exposed to dying alien consciousnesses in controlled conditions, these young people could form limited bonds that preserved ancient knowledge while gaining enhanced empathy and understanding. A new generation of human-alien partnerships began to emerge across the galaxy. Each one was unique, reflecting the combined strengths of both species involved. Humans brought creativity, emotional depth, and an unshakable belief in the power of connection. Their alien partners contributed wisdom, specialized abilities, and perspectives that spanned millennia. The galaxy was transforming, one story at a time. What had begun with a lonely dragon and a brave little girl had become a revolution in how species related to each other. Through the simple human gift for narrative, for finding meaning and building bridges across impossible differences, the universe itself was learning to tell a better story about what it meant to be alive among the stars.